Hi everyone. Today I'm here with Linda Jennings from Color Storms Yarn. We're talking about wheesht, and we are on the namesake chapter titled wheesht. So what did you think, Linda?
This chapter is pretty much blowing me away, and one of the things I did um, today was to actually look up the word "wheesht" and "hod our wheesht." What does that mean? Because she brings that up in the book. I don't know why last week I guessed at it, which of course is something one can do. But I'm moving on this week, and can tell you if the internet is correct, and please feel free to correct me. I'm still in the learning process here, but from what I can tell today, wheesht means a request for silence. And hodger wheesh just is a Scottish phrase that means shut up. So I guess it's a cry of insistence for wheesht. And so it's fascinating to me that perhaps the foundation to the whole process of creativity is this learning to become more comfortable in silence and listen to others and listening to yourself. So I've been thinking about that a lot this week and trying to listen better to when other people are talking to me.
So I just want to point out that right on the top of the back of our book is the definition of wheesht. So I'll read that real quick. It says, wheesht. I don't know what int means, but it's a verb, a noun, an adjective. Scots and Northern English dialects: to be quiet, to quieten, to hush, to remain silent, to hod or keep one's wheesht, to be quiet, to hold one's tongue. Also in diminutive forms: wheesht, wheeshy, the slightest sound, the least whisper, the faintest rumor or report. So it sounds like a really broad word. It can mean many different things depending on the context.
Here you go, proof that I never read the back of the book. I'm glad you found that. So it confirms that the internet was true. Although rather than shut up, it's a little more polite than that.
Well, she talks about how it in context it can mean shut up. So like I have read that within the book.
Okay.
So I agree with that idea.
Okay. Beautiful. The example she gives of this artist, Evelyn Glennie,
Mm-hmm.
who was not born deaf, but lost her hearing through what they call a routine childhood infection. And fortunately, she had parents and a music teacher were not, who were open-minded, I guess you could say. And
Mm-hmm.
they, I love that her teacher, Ron Forbes, sent her home with a drum and said, just try it out, explore it. What a great idea for anything. You know, she put it on her bed, on the floor, on some gravel. She played it in all different kinds of ways, and she investigated the whole concept of listening in amazingly new ways. Profound.
So much of what I'm noticing is that so much of the creative process is the output, and this chapter to me feels like the input, where you're listening and observing and in the most basic way, just existing
Mm. Mm.
and observing.
Yeah, I love the way she wrote, my whole body is an ear. She felt
Oh,
the sound through her chest and her belly and her neck, and her. legs. And she also talks about, she says, Glennie frequently describes how, while for the majority of people, the sense of hearing is passive and automatic, the act of listening is always active and engaged,
Mm.
whether an individual is able-bodied or impaired. Isn't it wonderful when you really feel listened to and you could tell the other person is taking it in? It's such a rare gift.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about how often I have something on in the background, like a podcast or, to fill up the silence. And am I giving that person my full attention? And am I missing out on some of the juiciness because I'm
Mm.
not actively listening?
Yeah,
And then, the extension of that is how often am I doing that with another person in real time?
sure. Yeah, and obviously sometimes we can't. We don't always have the wherewithal to do that.
Of
But
course.
certainly I think it is a wonderful gift to give when you can. Um, and she also talks about the humility of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this amazing piece she wrote in a recent documentary. She has described how attentively listening to individuals with dementia has enriched her own perspectives. So she brings an instrument to someone with dementia and lets them explore it like she was allowed to explore it. When you really listen to someone perhaps who has a different way of expressing themselves or doesn't have the same normal sense of back and forth conversation that we maybe are used to or think is the acceptable norm to work toward, um, and just let yourself listen to the other person and without bringing our own preconceptions into the room, right? Listening to what someone else has to say about something. It's just such a gift to ourselves too, right? When we really listen. Real listening takes real courage, writes Michael Verde, observing Glennie's dementia work.
Mm.
The courage to risk leaving the familiar and enter into awkward spaces. The courage to step out of one's armor and become vulnerable.
Yeah, the awkward sticks out to me. I feel like I live in the awkward most times. And then the flip side is like some people just cannot handle the slightest the slightest bit of uncomfortable or outside of a social norm or a standard script or like I feel like I'm constantly fumbling over my words and trying to communicate something but it's not quite working
Yeah, so perhaps part of the trick maybe is just getting comfortable with that awkwardness and
because I don't have a
understanding.
choice.
Yeah, understanding that's perhaps the price of admission for um, receiving that nugget that might happen if you or have the courage to enter in.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, things are unpredictable.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
I mean, it's just so interesting because, like, the social norms that we have within our culture are totally made up and completely, they're there, but we don't know why they happened or how they evolved,
Yeah,
and
when
yet,
you watch a period piece, and the way people used to communicate 100 years ago compared to now, you can
yeah,
see some of that evolution. And I remember once my daughter who majored in anthropology, she challenged me when I was complaining about some people not speaking proper English. And she was the one that kind of really drummed home for me the concept of English being acceptable in different forms. Because, as a homeschooler, I always taught my children English according to this one textbook that I used.
yeah,
Right? And then normally, newscasters on TV are taught to speak English in a certain way. And so
hmm
you grow up thinking that this is the proper way to do it, and anybody else who doesn't speak it that way is not up to par or isn't correct, or they're being disrespectful or divergent.
hmm
Um, and perhaps that's not true, right? Perhaps it's just a different version of English, which is just as acceptable as
and
any.
it is all made up in imaginary rules anyway. That's what I keep coming back to. Exactly what you're describing is like, who made the gatekeeper of our social norms? And like, why is there acceptable and unacceptable? And who decided that? And does it matter? And, you know,
Yeah, honestly, I think we live in an age where there is more that is acceptable than ever before.
which I am so here for. And we still have more work to do.
We have a lot more work to do. But I
Yeah.
think as far as that sort of thing goes, we're on a good path, and I hope we continue because it's not easy to walk down the path of accepting a lot of different normals, but also, trying to have respect for those who are different, um, and not also sometimes also maintaining some kind of moral code. Like I have a hard time with certain magazines, um, under the category of freedom of speech. So there's got to be to me, there's got to be some kind of moral code to go along with all this diversity that is accepted. And I don't really know where that is, and I think we're all struggling to find it. Let's keep talking about it, right? Let's
Yeah. Or maybe keep listening about it.
think even better.
Because that's what our chapter's about.
Amen. There you go.
It's a struggle for me, but if I make listening an active practice, I think that's for me that would be evolution and a new idea.
Yeah, that should be first, third, fourth, and fifth, seventh, eighth, and ninth.
I mean, I do see the irony in that we are talking about a chapter about listening. And so, like, even that paradox can exist.
Yeah, it's good.
So interesting.
It's good. Well, I did work on her homework, but
Great.
I'm gonna keep working on it, right? Because she talks about listening to each other for 8 full minutes, and
hmm
I think I'm up to 3.
I love that. We can talk about that more next week.
Okay. All right. Thank you for joining us, and
Mm,
consider that whole concept of listening as a growth in your creativity, and I hope it just brings more and more to your life.
mm.
Bye-bye.